A village is a clustered human settlement, a community, larger than a hamlet but smaller than a town, with a population ranging from a few hundred to a few thousand. Though often located in rural areas, the term urban village is also applied to certain urban neighborhoods. Villages are normally permanent, with fixed dwellings. However, transient villages can occur. Further, the dwellings of a village are fairly close to one another, not scattered broadly over the landscape, as a dispersed settlement. In the past, villages were a usual form of community for societies that practiced subsistence agriculture, and also for some non-agricultural societies. In Great Britain, a hamlet earned the right to be called a village when it built a church. In many cultures, towns and cities were few, with only a small proportion of the population living in them. The Industrial Revolution attracted people in larger numbers to work in mills and factories. The concentration of people caused many villages to grow into towns and cities. This also enabled specialization of labor and crafts, and development of many trades. The trend of urbanization continues, though not always in connection with industrialization. Villages have been eclipsed in importance as units of human society and settlement. Although many patterns of village life have existed, the typical village was small, consisting of perhaps 5 to 30 families. Homes were situated together for sociability and defense, and land surrounding the living quarters was farmed. Traditional fishing villages were based on artisan fishing and located adjacent to fishing grounds. South Asia, the soul of India lives in its villages, declared M.K. Gandhi at the beginning of 20th century. According to the 2011 census of India, 68.84% of Indians live in 640,867 different villages. The size of these villages varies considerably. 236,004 Indian villages have a population of fewer than 500, while 3,976 villages have a population of 10,000 plus. Most of the villages have their own temple, mosque, or church, depending on the local religious following. Central Asia. Ayul is a Kazakh word meaning village in Kazakhstan. According to the 2009 census of Kazakhstan, 42.7% of Kazakhs live in 8,172 different villages. East Asia. People's Republic of China. In mainland China, villages are divisions under township ZH, or town ZH. Republic of China. In the Republic of China, villages are divisions under townships or county-controlled cities. The village is called a suanakan under a rural township and a li under an urban township or a county-controlled city. See also Li. Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asia, Brunei and Indonesia. In Indonesia, depending on the principles they are administered, villages are called desa or kelurahan. A desa is administered according to traditions and customary law, while a kelurahan is administered along more modern principles. Desa are generally located in rural areas, while kelurahan are generally urban subdivisions. A village head is respectively called Kepala Desa or Lura. Both are elected by the local community. A desa or kelurahan is the subdivision of a kecamatan, in turn the subdivision of a kabupaten or kota. The same general concept applies all over Indonesia. However, there is some variation among the vast numbers of Austronesian ethnic groups. For instance, in Bali, villages have been created by grouping traditional hamlets or banja, which constitute the basis of Balinese social life. In the Minangkabau country in West Sumatra province, traditional villages are called nagari. In some areas such as Tanah Toraja, elders take turns watching over the village at command post. As a general rule, desa and kelurahan are groupings of hamlets. A kampung is defined today as a village in Brunei and Indonesia. Malaysia and Singapore. Kampung is a term used in Malaysia for a Malay hamlet or village in a Malay-speaking country. In Malaysia, a kampung is determined as a locality with 10,000 or fewer people. Since historical times, every Malay village came under the leadership of a penghulu, who has the power to hear civil matters in his village. A Malay village typically contains a masjid or surau, paddy fields and Malay houses on stilts. Malay and Indonesian villages practice the culture of helping one another as a community, which is better known as joint bearing of burdens. They are family-oriented, courtesy and practice belief in God as paramount to everything else. It is common to see a cemetery near the mosque. All Muslims in the Malay or Indonesian village want to be prayed for and to receive Allah's blessings in the afterlife. In Sarawak and East Kalimantan, some villages are called Long, primarily inhabited by the Orang Ulu. Malaysian kampung are found in Singapore, but there are few kampung villages remaining, mostly on islands surrounding Singapore, such as Pulau Ubin. In the past, there were many kampung villages in Singapore, but development and urbanization have replaced them. The term kampung, sometimes spelled kampong, is one of many Malay words to have entered common usage in Malaysia and Singapore. Locally, the term is frequently used to refer to either one's hometown or a rural village, depending on context. Myanmar, Philippines. In urban areas of the Philippines, the term village most commonly refers to private subdivisions, especially gated communities. These villages emerged in the mid-20th century and were initially the domain of elite urban dwellers. Those are common in major cities in the country, and the residents have a wide range of income levels. Such villages may or may not correspond to administrative units and/or be privately administered. Barangays more correspond to the villages of old times, and the chairman now settles administrative, intrapersonal, and political matters. A police is the village, though with much less authority and respect than in Indonesia or Malaysia. Thailand. Vietnam. Village, or lang, is a basis of Vietnam's society. Vietnam's village is the typical symbol of Asian agricultural production. Vietnam's village typically contains a village gate, Lui Tre Din Lang, where Than Hoang is worshipped, a common well, Dong Lua, Chua, and houses of all families in the village. All the people in Vietnam's villages usually have a blood relationship. They are farmers who grow rice and have the same traditional handicraft. Vietnam's villages have an important role in society. It is common for Vietnamese villages to prefer to be buried in the village upon death. Central and Eastern Europe. Slavic countries. Selo is a Slavic word meaning village in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Macedonia, Russia, Serbia, and Ukraine. For example, there are numerous sela called Novo Selo in Bulgaria, Croatia, Montenegro, and others in Serbia and Macedonia. Another Slavic word for a village is ves. In Slovenia, the word selo is used for very small villages, and in dialects, the Slovene word vas is used all over Slovenia. Bulgaria. In Bulgaria, the different types of selo vary from a small selo of 5 to 30 families to one of several thousand people. According to a 2002 census, in that year there were 2,385,000 Bulgarian citizens living in settlements classified as villages. A 2004 Human Settlement Profile on Bulgaria conducted by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs stated that the most intensive is the migration city. Approximately 46% of all migrated people have changed the residence from one city to another. The share of the migration processes village-city is significantly less, 23%, and city-village 20%. The migration village-village in 2002 is 11%. It also stated that the state of the environment in the small towns and villages is good apart from the low level of infrastructure. In Bulgaria, it is becoming popular to visit villages for the atmosphere, culture, crafts, hospitality of the people and the surrounding nature. This is called selski tourism, meaning village tourism. In Russia, as of the 2010 census, 26.3% of the country's population lives in rural localities, down from 26.7% recorded in the 2002 census. Multiple types of rural localities exist, but the two most common are derevnia and selo. Historically, the formal indication of status was religious. A city had a cathedral, a selo had a church, while a derevnia had neither. The lowest administrative unit of the Russian Empire, a volost, or its Soviet, a modern Russian successor of Sel-Soviet, was typically headquartered in a selo and embraced a few neighboring villages. Most Russian rural localities have populations of fewer than 200 people, and the smaller places take the brunt of depopulation. E.g., in 1959, about one-half of Russia's rural population lived in villages of fewer than 500 people, while now less than one-third does. In the 1960s-1970s, the depopulation of the smaller villages was driven by the central planner's drive in order to get the farm workers out of smaller, prospectless hamlets and into the collective estate farms as main villages or even larger towns and cities with more amenities. Most Russian rural residents are involved in agricultural work, and it is very common for villages to produce their own food. As prosperous urbanites purchase village houses for the second homes, Russian villages sometimes are transformed into dacha settlements, used mostly for seasonal residence. The historically Cossack regions of southern Russia and parts of Ukraine, with the fertile soil and absence of serfdom, had a rather different pattern of settlement from central and northern Russia. While peasants of central Russia lived in a village around the lord's manor, a Cossack family often lived on its own farm, called kuta. A number of such kutas plus a central village made up the administrative unit with a center in a stanitsa. Such stanitsas, often with a few thousand residents, were usually larger than a typical selo in central Russia. The term Aal is used to refer mostly Muslim-populated villages in Caucasus and Middle Ural, without regard to the number of residents. In Ukraine, a village, known locally as a selo, is considered the lowest administrative unit. Villages may have an individual administration or a joint administration, combining two or more villages. Villages may also be under the jurisdiction of a city council, a town council administration. There is, however, another smaller type of settlement which is designated in Ukrainian as a selicha. This type of community is generally referred to in English as a settlement. In comparison with an urban-type settlement, Ukrainian legislation does not have a concrete definition or a criterion to differentiate such settlements from villages. They represent a type of a small rural locality that might have once been a kutir, a fisherman's settlement, or a dacha. They are administered by a silrada located in a nearby adjacent village. Sometimes the term selicha is also used in a more general way to refer to adjacent settlements near a bigger city, including urban-type settlements and/or villages. However, ambiguity is often avoided in connection with urbanized settlements by referring to them using the three-letter abbreviation SMT instead. The kutir and stanisia are not part of the administrative division any longer, primarily due to collectivization. Kutirs were very small rural localities localities consisting of just few housing units and were sort of individual farms. They became really popular during the Stolypin reform in the early 20th century. During the collectivization, however, residents of such settlements were usually declared to be kulaks and had all the property confiscated and distributed to others without any compensation. The stanitsa likewise has not survived as an administrative term. The stanitsa was a type of a collective community that could include one or more settlements such as villages, kutirs, and others. Today, stanitsa-type formations have only survived in Cuba, where Ukrainians were resettled during the time of the Russian Empire. Western and Southern Europe. France. Same general definition as in the United Kingdom. An independent association named Les Plus-Beaux Villages de France was created in 1982 to promote assets of small and picturesque French villages of quality heritage. As of 2008, 152 villages in France have been listed in the most beautiful villages of France. Spain has plenty of little villages around its territory. The concept of village and country life is really present and usual in the north of the country, especially in Galicia. South of Barcelona is Spain's most romantic Mediterranean beach town, with a 2.5 kilometers long sandy beach and a promenade studded with flowers and palm trees. Sitges is a town with a rich connection to art. Picasso and Dali both spent time here. Mérida is an important Roman town with great tapas. Barcena Mare has houses that date back to the 6th century with simple 2 floors constructions and rectangular form. Salamanca, an ancient Celtic town, is also a Renaissance city with striking architecture. Its sandstones buildings have a beautiful luster, giving the city the nickname La Ciudad Dorada. Mérida Castellón is a medieval village located in the region of Comunitat Valenciana, with huge castles with a rich Renaissance history. Rogueira Pasturelands is one of the great ecological jewels of Galicia. Rivers, pools and springs abound in this verdant forest, as do underground water caves and caverns with a prehistoric past. San Martín is a charming small village well known for its Gothic spire. La Bisbal should be next on the list. The town is worth visiting for its main square and the castle. This Romanesque castle is situated in the middle of the town, giving it a romantic look. There is also Palafrugell, Palacete, Sant Julia and Sant Feliu de Boada. They are all very important because of the medieval patrimony. Castello d'Umfries has 13th-century Gothic churches. Angles also possesses outstanding medieval constructions throughout its village. All villages have a church or hermitage. Portugal villages are more usual in the northern and central regions, Azores Islands and in the Alentejo. Most of them have a church in a Casa de Povo, where the village's summer romeries or religious festivities are usually held. Summer is also when many villages are host to a range of folk festivals and fairs, taking advantage of the fact that many of the locals who reside abroad tend to come back to the native village for the holidays. Netherlands. In the flood-prone districts of the Netherlands, villages were traditionally built on low man-made hills called terps before the introduction of regional dike systems. In modern days, the term dorp is usually applied to settlements no larger than 20,000, though there's no official law regarding status of settlements in the Netherlands. United Kingdom. A village in the UK is a compact settlement of houses, smaller in size than a town, and generally based on agriculture or, in some areas, mining, quarrying or sea fishing. They are very similar to those in Ireland. The major factors in the type of settlement are location of water sources, organization of agriculture and landholding, and likelihood of flooding. For example, in areas such as the Lincolnshire Wolds, the villages are often found along the spring line halfway down the hillsides, and originate as spring line settlements, with the original open field systems around the village. In northern Scotland, most villages are planned to a grid pattern located on or close to major roads, whereas in areas such as the Forest of Arden, woodland clearances produce small hamlets around village greens. Because of the topography of the Clent Hills, the North Worcestershire village of Clent is an example of a village with no centre but instead consists of series of hamlets scattered on and around the hills. Some villages have disappeared, sometimes leaving behind a church or manor house and sometimes nothing but bumps in the fields. Some show archaeological evidence of settlement at 3 or 4 different layers, each distinct from the previous one. Clearances may have been to accommodate sheep or game estates, or enclosure, or may have resulted from depopulation, such as after the Black Death or following a move of the inhabitants to more prosperous districts. Other villages have grown and merged and often form hubs within the general mass of suburbia, such as Hampstead, London and Didsbury in Manchester. Many villages are now predominantly dormitory locations and have suffered the loss of shops, churches and other facilities. For many British people, the village represents an ideal of Great Britain. Seen as being far from the bustle of modern life, it is represented as quiet and harmonious, if a little inward-looking. This concept of an unspoilt Arcadia is present in many popular representations of the village, such as the radio serial The Archers of the Best Kept. Village competitions. Many villages in South Yorkshire, North Nottinghamshire, North East Derbyshire, County Durham, South Wales and Northumberland are known as pit villages. These grew from hamlets when the sinking of a colliery in the early 20th century resulted in a rapid growth in the population, and the colliery owners built new housing, shops, pubs and churches. Some pit villages outgrew nearby towns by area and population. For example, Rossington in South Yorkshire came to have over 4 times more people than the nearby town of Bawtry. Some pit villages grew to become towns. For example, Maltby in South Yorkshire grew from 600 people in the 19th century to over 17,000 in 2007. Maltby was constructed under the auspices of the Sheepbridge Coal and Iron Company and included ample open spaces and provision for gardens. In the UK, the main historical distinction between a hamlet and a village was that the latter had a church, and so usually was the centre of worship for an ecclesiastical parish. However, some civil parishes may contain more than one village. The typical village had a pub or inn, shops, and a blacksmith. But many of these facilities are now gone, and many villages are dormitories for commuters. The population of such settlements ranges from a few hundred people to around 5,000. A village is distinguished from a town in that a village should not have a regular agricultural market, although today such markets are uncommon even in settlements which clearly are towns. A village does not have a town hall nor a mayor. If a village is the principal settlement of a civil parish, then any administrative body that administers it at parish level should be called a parish council, a parish meeting, and not a town council or city council. However, some civil parishes have no functioning parish, town, or city council, nor a functioning parish meeting. In Wales, where the equivalent of an English civil parish is called a community, the body that administers it is called a community council. However, larger councils may elect to call themselves town councils. Unlike Wales, Scottish community councils have no statutory powers. There should be a clear green belt or open fields, as, for example, seen on aerial maps for Ouston surrounding its parish borders. However, this may not be applicable to urbanized villages. Although these may not consider to be villages, they are often widely referred to as being so. An example of this is Horsforth in Leeds. Part. Middle East, Lebanon. Like France, villages in Lebanon are usually located in remote mountainous areas. The majority of villages in Lebanon retain their Aramaic names or a derivative of the Aramaic names, and this is because Aramaic was still in use in Mount Lebanon up to the 18th century. Many of the Lebanese villages are a part of districts. These districts are known as Qada, which includes the districts of Bada, Ali, Matn, Kesawan, Chauf, Jabil, Tripoli, Zedgata, Bishari, Batroun, Kora, Mini Udaniya, Zalat, Rishaya, Western Beqaa, Sidon, Jazin, Ta, Nabatiya, Marjalun, Hasba, Bint Jabil, Baalbek, and Hermel. The district of Daniyu consists of 36 small villages, which includes Almra, Kafishlan, Afiabab, Hakul al-Azama, Siya, Baikhoun, Miriata, Asun, Spheri, Karnub, Katin, Thirabu, Zedgata, Grin, Ein Kebel. Daniya is a region located in Daniyu district in the North Governorate of Lebanon. The region lies east of Tripoli, extends north as far as Akka district, south to Bishari district and Zedgata district, and as far east as Baalbek and Hermel. Daniyu has an excellent ecological environment filled with woodlands, orchards and groves. Several villages are located in this mountainous area, the largest town being Sir al-Diniya. An example of a typical mountainous Lebanese village in Daniya would be Hakul al-Azama, which is a small village that belongs to the district of Daniya, situated between Baikhoun and Asun's boundaries. It is in the center of the valleys that lie between the Arbin Mountains and the Kanzu. Syria contains a large number of villages that vary in size and importance, including the ancient, historical and religious villages, such as Malula, Senaa, and Brad. The diversity of the Syrian environments creates significant differences between the Syrian villages in terms of the economic activity and the method of adoption. Villages in the south of Syria, the northeast and the Orontes River basin depend mostly on agriculture, mainly grain, vegetables and fruits. Villages in the region of Damascus and Aleppo depend on trading. Some other villages, such as Marmarita, depend heavily on tourist activity. Mediterranean cities in Syria, such as Tartus and Latakia, have similar types of villages. Mainly, villages were built in very good sites which had the fundamentals of the rural life, like water. An example of a Mediterranean Syrian village in Tartus would be Al-Nazar, which is a small village that belongs to the area of Al-Saud. The area of Al-Sauda is called Anafia, which is a sub-district. Australasia and Oceania. Pacific Islands. Communities on Pacific Islands were historically called villages by English speakers who traveled and settled in the area. Some communities, such as several villages of Guam, continue to be called villages despite having large populations that can exceed 40,000 residents. New Zealand. The traditional Maori village was the pa, a fortified hilltop settlement. Tree fern logs and flax were the main building materials. As in Australia, the term is now used mainly in respect of shopping or other planned areas. Australia. The term village often is used in reference to small planned communities such as retirement communities or shopping districts, and tourist areas such as ski resorts. Small rural communities are usually known as townships. Larger settlements are known as towns. South America. Argentina usually set in remote mountainous areas. Some also cater to winter sports and/or tourism. See Uspallata, La Cumbresita, Villa Triful in Locumba.